Hello, I'm Ira Glass. It's rare that any of the people who you'll be seeing tonight works a room that only holds 280 people, so it's a special evening. We're going to begin with one of the musical numbers. You'll be hearing 3 musical numbers over the course of the night. And we're going to begin with the Love Duet from the first act of Rigoletto. And to perform that, we have a pianist who is overqualified for the job. It's the Met's Director of Musical Administration, Craig Rutenberg, and then 2 of the stars of this new production of Rigoletto, Piotr Beczala and Diana Damrau. Please welcome them. Well, the director of this production of Rigoletto is Michael Mayer. A set designer is Kristen Jones. They've collaborated before on Broadway on Spring Awakening, for which he won a Tony, and American Idiot, for which she won a Tony. This is the first opera that either of them has has worked on, and let me welcome them to the stage. So let's start with the main idea of this production, the question that I'm sure you're getting sick of answering. You have this classic old opera. So what were you looking for as a setting that led you to choose Las Vegas? Like, what did you want?
Well, the first thing I should say is that in many cases, and in particular at the Met, I believe, that there's, oh yeah, you like it when it's close.
I do.
It's the radio thing. Is usually there's an enormous amount of lead time, usually at least 5 years, when someone is invited to do a new production. And in this case, there was very little time. In fact, when Peter Gelb called me,
This is the general manager at the Met.
Yes, that's right. He called from Europe, and it turned out that there was an opening to do a new production of Rigoletto 2 years from that phone call. And I had...
From Europe, so not only did he call you, he called you long distance.
He called me, it was a long distance call, a trunk call.
Okay.
Anyway, he called and said, you know, I'm going to be back in New York in a couple days. If you could have a concept ready by then, that'd be great. So, and I've always loved Rigoletto. And I listened to it a lot and read the libretto. And I know that one of the things that Peter was looking for was something that I also believe is really worth doing, which is reimagining the great classics in a fresh way, a way that might illuminate aspects of the story or the score or the characters in a way that people can relate to in a contemporary way, that it's somehow resonant to our culture today. And Rigoletto, if you don't know it, is Verdi set the opera in 16th century Mantua, and it's the story of a court jester, you know, the real, like, a hunchback court jester with the motley and the things, you know, hanging down with the ball, the bells, and the little wand that has the little head on it, you know, that looks like his. You've seen it. It's that iconic thing. And he is the jester for the Duke of Mantua, who is the head of a very licentious world. And he is trying to keep his beautiful, chaste daughter hidden away, secreted away from the Duke and the Duke's retinue of scoundrels to keep her safe and virtuous. And it's a tragedy, and at the end of the day, what happens is the thing that he most fears, which is that the Duke does end up having his way with his daughter, and at the end of the opera, she ends up sacrificing herself for the Duke because Rigoletto has basically put a hit out on him.
He puts a hit out on the Duke.
On the Duke,
that goes wrong.
For violating his daughter. So I'm thinking, okay, so what is a cultural equivalent to the world of the Duke? I didn't look at the characters right away. I just was thinking about what is the world of this opera. And it's, you know, it's licentious, it's decadent, it's a world where women are basically playthings and sexual objects, and they're just to be looked at or toyed with. It's a place where there's a lot of glamour and lots of money and power and sex and violence, a place where there's a kind of culture of luck and belief in superstition. And so I thought of Las Vegas, of course. It seemed like, you know, a contemporary Las Vegas, in fact. And when I brought this to Peter, and he suggested that I think of maybe a more timeless Las Vegas that would sort of echo the timeless nature of this classic masterpiece that Verdi wrote. And so thinking, it didn't take me long to come up with this because it's pretty obvious if you think of like what is the most iconic version of Las Vegas, the moment where it is crystallized in our consciousness as being a cultural touchstone, and that would be the year that they made Ocean's 11, right? The Rat Pack in 1960. As you can see up here, these are images that Christine and I started to play with when I went to her, my favorite set designer.
Before we pass through these, so Christine, so can I just ask, but could we hold on the slides for a second? So he comes to you and says, Las Vegas 1960s.
Well, I get a phone call.
Yeah.
Not long distance. And he says, Christine, would you like to design Rigoletto at the Metropolitan Opera? We have 4 months to do it. So I panicked and was really quite daunted and hesitant about taking on the job because it was so little time. But I went to also see Peter Gelb and went to see all the different people working in all the departments and was easily convinced that it was a great thing to do. And so then we just dove right in and started researching the period. And
is 60s Vegas, is that, when you hear that as a designer, do you think like that's like a playground for you? Or do you think like, oh no, there's all sorts of pitfalls because people have done 60s Vegas? Do you know?
No, the first response was, oh, fantastic. I have 4 months. Thank God he's coming to me with an idea. Because normally when Michael and I work together, we both start from the exact same blank slate and we develop the concept together. Right. And in this case, he came to me with this idea. So we had a gate to start out of. And the first thing that came into my head was neon. You know, the first image you have of Las Vegas is just signs everywhere. So there was a rich place to begin. I didn't get scared till a lot later.
So let's go through. So we're looking at some pictures.
Yeah, okay, this is a good place to stop, right here. So once I hit on the Las Vegas thing, the Rat Pack, I started to try to, again, find equivalencies in the characters. And I thought, well, what if the Duke is like old Blue Eyes? You know, he's the chairman of the board. He's a co-owner of the casino. Maybe it's his casino that it takes place in. And maybe, you know, his retinue, as it exists in the original opera, is actually his entourage. And it's the Rat Pack. Or a version of it. You know, they're such iconic figures.
Yeah, let's pause on that. And so did you map out in your head, so the Duke will be like Sinatra, like he's the one who calls the shots?
Exactly.
And then did you go through the script?
Like, a little bit.
The Borsa, Marilla?
I did a tiny bit. I mean, they're not literal because that's not what we're doing and it's not actually what Verdi wrote. But it's close enough, and I think it will be resonant enough for people that they'll appreciate the inherent values of those characters. So if the Duke is the Sinatra type, then Borsa is the Peter Lawford type because he's always procuring these Hollywood women or these political women for the Sinatra type to have his way with. And, you know, we know that, you know, at least that's the rumor, but I think people pretty much know that's how it worked. And then Marullo, who's always wandering the streets, it seems, and maybe he's a little, you know, would be the Dean Martin type character. And then Rigoletto is the comic, right? So in my mind, he's a Joey Bishop / Jackie Gleason / Don Rickles, with the emphasis on Don Rickles, who had a very, very mean approach to comedy. And in doing my research on the Rat Pack, Don Rickles was actually incredibly brutal to them. And you can actually go on YouTube and go Don Rickles, Rat Pack, and you can see some amazing footage of him just tearing them to shreds. And they're so drunk, they just love it, I think.
And which is key for people who don't know the story, which is key to the plot. Like, he's so mean that somebody seeks vengeance on him.
People don't like Rigoletto. They acknowledge that he is very funny and he is a personal favorite of the Duke, but they personally have a grudge against him. And in the original story, he's the jester, but here he's the comic, and it really tracks out quite nicely. So if Rigoletto is this really sort of unpleasant and character who's making fun of everyone all the time, and Marullo, the Dean Martin type, is out on the town one night and notices Rigoletto walking his mistress home, that is big news. And so he comes in, charging into the casino and says basically, guys, you won't believe this, but Rigoletto has a mistress, and everyone, is shocked because he's such an unpleasant creature. So that sets the whole plot in motion.
Okay, so let's go. So I think there's slides soon of the, yeah. And so now here's your set, right?
Yeah, that's the prologue where you'll see, and here's the casino. There's more neon than the Met has ever seen, let me tell you. Yeah, and these are the costumes.
And who's who here? What are we
The
looking
Duke
at?
is on the left in the white coat, dinner jacket, and Rigoletto, he was always in motley, and so this is Susan Hilferty's really, I think, quite brilliant version of sort of a golf outfit that would be his kind of performance, costume, but it's got a little of what we would, of the contemporary motley of a cardigan in that tartan pattern. And he has a slight hump, so he's still the hunchback. He's slightly deformed in that way as he refers to himself. And this is Marullo and Borsa. And this is a new set of characters who you meet very, very early on. The Count Ciprano, who is like a Sam Giancana, and this is his wife, or maybe she's some movie star who he's attached to, but his wife. And this is what the rest of the gang would look like at the casino. And these are the showgirls. We have showgirls. And these are the Egyptian dancers. And okay, let's stop here for a second. So there's a character in the original named Monterone who is, he's just an older nobleman whose daughter has been seduced by the Duke, and he shows up at the casino, or at the Duke's palace in the original, and demands restitution, and Rigoletto mocks him. And the Duke doesn't take him seriously at all, and in fact has him arrested. And as he's being arrested for interrupting things, he puts a curse on Rigoletto and the Duke. But Rigoletto takes it very personally. And when we were talking about who our Monterone would be,
because it seems like it's a problem if you're trying to make contemporary this old story, because what is the contemporary equivalent of somebody putting a curse on someone else?
right, so we thought it would be like an old Italian or something, but how would you tell the difference? Because he'd just be in another suit like everyone else. And
we're all old Italians in this production.
Exactly. So I started, in some of the research I discovered is that this was a moment in time where there was Saudi money coming into America and into Las Vegas. And I thought, God, that would be amazing if it was someone like old world who had a whole other look to him, who might really put the fear of God into someone like Rigoletto, who is sheltered from this kind of otherworldly, old, ancient kind of thing. So I thought, okay, let him be a Saudi sheikh, and he's got his two bodyguards, and he comes in. And how great would that be if if the Duke rather had molested the daughter of an Arab sheikh, and if he put a curse on Rigoletto, I mean, that might scare the bejesus out of him. So that's how he came to Monterone. It's also, let me just say one other thing about that and the sort of the Cleopatra thing that you saw prior. Las Vegas is in the desert, and there was the Orientalist idea of entertainment, I think, was really incorporated a lot in the sands and the Sahara, and there was a lot of there were like Egyptian themes and Arabic themes, and the idea of a harem and multiple wives and these men loaded with jewels and money and camels, who had the world at their disposal. So it seemed like a nice mirror for that. And we'll talk about that later, I think, about
okay.
the Egyptian business, because it plays into it. Okay, go on.
I don't even know what you're talking about. Okay, yes, so I guess we will talk about that later. Noting the forward promote. Okay, let's go to the next. Let's go back to the slide.
This is. Oh, wait. Go back. Oh, okay. There's Gilda on the right, the beautiful daughter of Rigoletto, and in the green sweater is her maid Giovanna, whose charge it is to see that she goes nowhere but church. And in the original, they live in a little house, and here they live in a big apartment building. And so she takes her down in the elevator and takes her to church and brings her back home, and she's not allowed to ever go on the Strip or see any of the shows. She can't see Wayne Newton or anything. She's so deprived. These are the guys when they decide that they're going to play a joke on Rigoletto, and they're going to kidnap his girlfriend. They don't know it's his daughter. They're going to kidnap his girlfriend, and that would be really funny, they think. And that's also, I mean, we talked a lot about Las Vegas being a place where there's pranks, and it's almost like frat boy humor that could go awry. And some tragic stuff could happen, as it does in this opera. It's very much like the world of Vegas, the Hangover movie. Like if it's a comedy, but it could have gone very, very wrong. That tiger could have eaten someone. All right. Okay, this is the second scene.
And I wanted to say, actually, that when we set out to do Vegas and the idea of a casino, it wasn't necessarily to do it literally, but to evoke that feeling of craziness and out of control where anything can happen. And Kevin Adams, when we first started working on it, who's the lighting designer, said, oh, you should look at these great Robert Venturi photographs. So we did, and they're of Vegas at the period. And there was one photograph in particular that was actually sort of a multiple exposure photograph, and everything was seen blurry, and the signs were repeated. And I thought, oh, that's actually the spirit of it. Because people are seeing this world through drunken eyes. These men are gambling, drinking, feasting. In our story, they're probably taking pills as well.
Benzodrine inhalers.
So it's really that kind of energy, and things are out of control, and it's sort of the impression of Vegas, not necessarily a literal representation.
The signs that you're using, when you see the real set, some of the signs are so funny. There's a sign which is like a neon hand, which like position 1, it's holding a bottle like this, and position 2, it's holding the bottle like this, and position 3, it's holding the bottle like this. I saw that, I was like, could that be real, or did you just make that one up because it's funny?
That's totally real.
That's real.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, how excited was I when I found that research? I mean, the research is great. So there was a lot of really fun and crazy, but also beautiful images to pull from. And we sort of created a collage. So again, it's more of an impression and a collage of the Strip of Vegas than a representation.
A mythic Vegas, not a real Vegas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are we looking at here?
So what we're looking at here is the bar. As you can see, it says bar, and and this is in our version. It's a bar, and in the original version, it's a lonely street where Rigoletto is approached by a paid assassin named Sparafucile, and here he's like a hitman, and and they've got quite an incredible duet here, and that's what this is a picture of.
Because you and I were talking before this about what were the things that were tricky to figure out, and you both were saying that one of the things that was tricky was how to get from the opening scene, which establishes all the characters and the conflict, which takes place in the palace, so it's full of people, to the second scene in the first act, where it really is just him and this murderer for hire. And so you basically just changed the setting to this.
Well, one of the things that we felt in going through it is the first scene is unbelievably chock full of action, and it just flies by. And in most productions, I believe that what happens is they lower a curtain, and there's, the lights come up, and they call it a pause, and you wait for 5 minutes while they change the set to be the street outside Rigoletto's house. and it feels too soon to have a pause. It's like, let's keep going. And Christine brilliantly had this idea that if there's a bar downstage at the casino, if we make everything else kind of go away, we can pull focus down to the bar. And that scene, and Sparo Fucile is sitting at the bar drinking, and he turns around.
That's the assassin.
And starts having this conversation with Rigoletto. Meanwhile, we can start to prepare the scene for the courtyard outside Rigoletto and Gilda's apartment.
And what
Which
that
is
also set up
this, yeah.
was the bartender, and so Rigoletto is able to deliver his aria to a bartender, which again in this world felt right. It's 3 a.m. Somebody just put a curse on you.
Oh, it's
All
like
you
that famous
want,
Frank Sinatra song.
Exactly.
It's 2:45.
Exactly.
There's no one in the place except you and me. I told you I would sing today.
2 more lines.
That's it. No, I'm done. No, we have amazing singers here tonight. I won't embarrass myself.
And so the next setting is a setting where what has to happen? What is this?
So this is, well, why don't you take it?
So we go from the bar to Rigoletto's home, which is actually described as a courtyard. We don't actually go inside Rigoletto's apartment, but we are near where he lives, and he has been protecting his daughter, as we mentioned. And so when I started to think about, well, if you have a daughter that you're trying to protect, what do you do with her? And in fairy tales, you put her in a tower and you lock her away. And that seemed like a good choice for Rigoletto and Gilda. So looking at the flamingo and the sands, and again, kind of pulling architectural elements and details from there, we came up with these towers, and this gate sort of wall unit flies in downstage of the casino. And Rigoletto goes over to the elevator, takes his key, and unlocks the door. And then Gilda comes down, and comes down with Giovanna. And then
Wait, so she gets kidnapped through the elevator? Basically, they take her down the elevator?
Well,
Yeah,
in the
later on.
original,
There's a ladder.
there's a
Yeah.
ladder. Famously, it's like there's a kind of cockamamie moment in the original, where and some of the dramaturgy of the original is tricky, and I think it gives every director and every production team some trouble to figure out how it happens. But the guys all come. They're going to come and take Gilda, and they're going to take a ladder, and they're going to climb up into her room and kidnap her. But Rigoletto shows up unexpectedly, and they're all wearing masks, so no one can see who they are. And in this case, they've taken the Egyptian masks from the dancers earlier. And they put a mask on Rigoletto, and they say, "Here, hold the ladder. We're capturing Countess Ceprano to play a trick on Count Ceprano." So for some reason, Rigoletto doesn't know that he's putting the ladder in front of his own house. I don't know why. He puts a mask on, and it indicates that when he has a mask on, he can neither see nor hear. I don't know why, but what an amazing kind of mask from 1851, I guess. They had that kind of thing. I don't know what it is, but that's how it worked. So he would hold the ladder with his mask on and not be able to see or hear, and they would go up the ladder, take Gilda, take her away, and then he would get tired of waiting, and he'd pull his mask off, and then he could hear her singing in the distance, "Help me, help me," and he realized they had taken her, and he's full of despair and believes that this is the curse that Monterone put on him, and that's the end of the first act. In our version, we wanted to figure out how it is that he doesn't know what's happening. Why can't he hear? It doesn't make sense that you put a mask on and you can't hear. It just doesn't. I'm sorry. Also, you can see through a mask. That's the whole point. It's like you have a mask on, you can still see. You're not blind. So it didn't really make any sense. So we had this idea that we got very excited about, and it was a little scary because it's so out there, but the idea would be that if he has this special key with a rabbit's foot on it, that would unlock stage right tower, and let's say that Ceprano and his wife...
Stage right tower is the left.
The one that's lit up, and that maybe in the other tower across the stage is where Ceprano lives, in that apartment building. So that when Rigoletto surprises them, they say, oh yeah, we're going to kidnap Countess Ceprano. Ceprano has his mask on, so Rigoletto doesn't recognize him, and they give him the key, and he recognizes it. He says, oh, this is Ceprano's key. Oh, she's over in that tower. And they say, yeah, put a mask on so no one can recognize you. You go up in and go to their apartment and wait for us, and we'll come and then we'll capture her together. So he goes up in the elevator. So while he's in the elevator on one side of the stage, they rush in, having stolen his key out of his pocket, unlock his door, go up, take Gilda, they carry her off in a fun way that we needn't get into here. But if you come see it, you'll see a really great prop. Anyway, they carry her off, and she sings her "Help Me, Help Me," but he can't hear because he's up on the, in Ceprano's penthouse. Eventually, he comes down, the door opens, and they're all gone. He looks over across to his house. He sees that his elevator doors open. His key is in the lock, and Giovanna is bound and gagged and sitting in the elevator.
Giovanna, who's supposed to be guarding her.
Who's supposed to be guarding her, and that's when he realizes she's been taken. So it makes, I think, somewhat more sense anyway. That's our big elevator trick.
Now, when you do that, do you change the words? For example, there are lyrics where they say, hold the ladder, and later when Borsa recounts the story for the Duke, he explains, well, what we did is that we had the full, hold a ladder, and do you change the words of
We didn't change the words, but, what is a ladder? It's a way to go up and down. What does an elevator do? It goes up and down, right? I mean, hold this, you could say. Hold this.
the elevator.
Please hold the elevator, hold the button.
Because the rules are you're not allowed to change a single word?
Not a single word. Oh, when we were teching this is maybe for the second part when we talk about process, but there was our associate choreographer when we were working out one of the transitions. One of them was very, very tight. We didn't have a lot of time, and she said, and she comes from the musical theater, Broadway, like we do, and she says, oh, just double the measures. And the looks from the music department, you can just imagine. Double the measures? I mean, that was sacrilege. No, you can't change them. You can't add or subtract a note of music. You can't change the lyric. It would be like changing, really like changing Shakespeare. You just don't do it. You figure out a way to make those words work. I mean, there are a couple tiny cuts that some people put into, and Rigoletto only has a couple. I mean, it's a very, very, very kind of perfect piece of music, and we don't do any of the cuts, I believe.
Okay, let's keep going. So then, so this is the Act 2 set, right?
Act 2, we are now in the Dukes.
Is this based on something? So this is somebody's apartment suite. Is this based on a real thing?
No, it's not. But it was the idea, well, if it's the Duke's casino, then he probably has a really swanky apartment in the casino. So it's his penthouse apartment. And
It's like the living room area.
yeah, so we just kind of went from there and pulled, again, images from lots of different sources. In fact, the chandeliers are reminiscent of the chandeliers in the opera house. And in fact, we were able to use some parts. I said, do you guys have any spare parts lying around? Because I want to make, these chandeliers. And actually, there were several elements. Some of the railing details and the gate that you saw in the courtyard. If you're at the Met, you'll see in the lobby that a lot of the ironwork is very similar. It's of a similar period. And
So you're saying the Met is like a big casino?
Well, you just said that, Ira. But as a designer, I always do like to think about how a design sits within the theater that it is placed. And so I like to echo different architectural elements so that what's happening on stage feels connected to what is happening in the audience. And this piece lends itself to doing that in several ways.
Let's see the next slide. I think there's a couple of these.
Yeah. So the Duke comes back to his apartments, having gone to find Gilda, and she's been taken away, and he's distraught because he really has feelings for this girl. His cronies tell him, "Oh, don't worry, we did this very cool thing. We got her for you. We got that girl for you, and she's downstairs in your bedroom. Go to it." And
now, when Act Two begins, when the curtain opens on Act Two, what you see is the set the way you have it, this room, and then there's like 60 guys. It's all
42.
42. Okay,
Yeah.
and they're all like passed out.
Yeah, they had a really rough night of drinking and carrying on.
And there's like an Egyptian sarcophagus tilted on one side, like, and it's just like it's like a scene from The Hangover. It's like
That's what it's supposed to be, reminiscent of like one of those it's like 5 a.m. or something, and everyone drank too much. They took too many pills. They had, they're half undressed. Some of them, they're just crashed wherever they can.
And Christine, I know that you made the design for this set for Act Two, and then later you had a realization about the way the act plays. Just want to explain that.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, we were doing this all very, very quickly, and there's so many elements that you're trying to take into account for the staging and how you get from one set to another and how you get there in the time of the music. And there was a moment when we had realized that, oh, this makes a lot of sense. It would make sense that the Duke would have his apartment, and that's where we'll set Act Two. But then came the realization that, oh, there are also 42 people on stage with him, and I've created a set that has 2 elevator entrances and 1 stairwell. How am I going to get 42 people on stage through 2 elevators? That could get really comedic in a way we don't want very quickly.
Yeah.
But I've learned through working with Michael for many years that sometimes challenges are amazing opportunities, and if you can sort of slow down for a moment and think, okay, well, how can I look at this differently? And then we had the thought that, well, they've kidnapped Gilda, they've been on a tear, and it would make sense that they go back to the Duke's apartment and are just celebrating. They've ordered room service, there's carts, there's champagne bottles, and they've been up all night, and now it's, again, 4 a.m, and they're passed out. So when we come to the Duke, they are there, and it's after
They don't need an entrance.
They don't need an entrance because they're already there.
Another interesting thing that we found...
Because they don't sing for a while.
They don't sing
they don't
for a
have
while.
anything to do for a
Exactly, they
while,
don't
so you just
sing.
have them lay there unconscious.
Passed out.
Kind of
That's your
fantastic.
design solution.
Yeah.
We'll just leave them dead on stage because they don't actually sing for like a couple minutes.
Exactly.
That's right.
Well,
Yeah.
he has a beautiful aria, and then they come to.
Yeah.
Some people do enter from the elevator and come up from where we know Gilda has been kept.
Yeah.
And it's possible they warmed her up for him. You never know. The one thing that happens is that Rigoletto, when Rigoletto shows up, and it's a really horrifying and very beautiful song, and he's pretending that he is just there to hang out with everyone, but you watch him sort of searching for signs of her, and it's quite heartbreaking, and Željko does it magnificently. But at one, she does come up. She breaks free from the Duke, runs up, unexpectedly sees her father there. They have a beautiful scene, and she sings and says what happened to her. He basically says to everyone, "Leave us alone," and that. For a moment, I had a little panic, like, ooh, how do they leave? But
Right, because you've got like 40 people on stage, they can't leave.
But and this is before we had solidified everything. We could have put doors in if we wanted to at that point. But I looked at the lyric, and the literal translation is, when a man is crazy, it's best to pretend to give him his way.
The chorus sings that.
The chorus sings that. So if they're pretending, then they pretend that they're going to let him on his own. So they all sort of move away. They turn their backs on him. They're going to give him privacy. And it works beautifully because then they can keep looking back, and you really get the sense of the public humiliation for Rigoletto and also for his daughter who has been violated.
Okay, let's go through the rest. So
This is,
so now here's Act 3.
I should say that Act 2 ends with Monterone being taken in to be executed by the Duke's guys, and he says, I didn't get to take my vengeance. I didn't get my vengeance on the Duke. And Rigoletto, after Monterone's been killed, says, I will take vengeance for you, because he has violated my daughter too. And Gilda is saying, please forgive him. And there's an unbelievable duet, SI Vendetta, which you're actually going to hear in a few minutes. So that's the end of Act 2. Act 3, in the original, is an inn on the outskirts of town where Sparafucile, the assassin, is with his sister, who helps him, and she sort of flirts with guys. So it's indicated that she's kind of someone who attracts the men so that he can kill them. Why don't you go from here, Christine?
Well, so we're in Las Vegas. So the outskirts of Las Vegas are Nevada, and the edges of the casino area take you to the brothels. So, so this act is set in Sparafucili's brothel strip club. His sister is one of the dancers, and it's on the edge of town. There's a neon arrow that points you where to go. There's beaded curtains hanging within the space. But we also begin to deconstruct the world further from here. As we said, all of this in a way begins from some poor choices that go very badly. I think when Gilda's kidnapped, nobody expects that she's going to end up murdered. Everything kind of falls apart as people become more drunken and more out of control. And so the visual vocabulary comes apart as well. The neon signs that we saw in Act 1 have now become more abstract and are further removed from what you expect to see them as. It's kind of a scribble, it's a storm of neon, and this scene very famously is kind of framed by the event of the storm, which is a musical event as well as a plot event. And so for us, it's an electrical storm, and the neon becomes a device with which we can tell that story as well.
And then I know that
Sparafucili has the trunk, what you see to the left of the club is Sparafucili's car. That's parked out front, and Rigoletto and Gilda enter and sort of use the car to be able to spy on what's happening inside the club.
Yeah, and then later one of the things you have to solve is that in the opera, the dead body gets put into a bag, put into a sack, and you had to figure out, well, what's a equivalent in this world? And the thing that you decide is
well, if you were going to, what happens very quickly, what happens is Rigoletto brings Gilda to Sparafucile's. He knows the Duke is going to be there, and he wants to show her. He's waited 30 days. In my mind, he's waited...
I don't even think you have to give them these details.
Really? Okay,
All they need to know is everything works out in the worst possible way.
That's
It's
true.
almost like if you were to try to design with a math equation the worst possible thing that could happen to him.
Okay, fine.
It happens.
It does.
Ending up
it happens with the
dead.
death of Gilda.
Yeah.
And in the original, she's put into a sack, which Rigoletto carries, and he's going to dump it in the river. And when he just about is going to do that, he believes it's the body of the Duke. He has paid Sparafucile to kill the Duke, and then he hears the Duke sing a kind of famous song, and he realizes, oh my God, the Duke is still alive. Well, then who is in this sack? And he tears the sack open, and it's his daughter, who is not quite dead because she still has to sing a giant duet with him, of course. But there she is, and usually what happens is they're on the floor, and there's a sack, and she dies in his arms. But if it's going to be 1960 and he's a hitman, well, what do you do with a dead body? You put it in the trunk of a car, and you drive it to the river, and you dump it. So that's what we do.
Or to the desert.
Yeah. Well, there's, somewhere in the desert, and maybe dig a hole and just let the coyotes at it or whatever.
So
It's not fun.
Yeah. So let's do our next number.
Let's do the next number, which is SI Vendetta. This is the song at the end of Act 2. And Craig Rutenberg will be playing, and Željko Lučić, our Rigoletto, will be singing with Diana Damrau again as Gilda.
So let's welcome them.
That's pretty amazing.
That makes all of our talking seem so stupid.
Right?
Oh, blah, 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 artistic decisions.
Maybe Michael could sing again.
No. That's incredible.
So you guys have done tons of musical theater. You were saying that an opera they'll plan on for years. When you guys do a musical together, how long does it take?
Well, it really depends, but it's a more, shall we say, organic process. So even if it's a Broadway show, you never know if you're going to get a theater, when the theater will be available, the process of creating new work, which we've mostly done. And even the revival we did was basically newly imagined. So everything we've done has been kind of from scratch and working together in this kind of delirious artistic bubble.
And so what's different directing a musical, like just in the day-to-day, like here's what it's like for you guys? What's different directing musical theater from directing an opera? After all, it's just actors and singing, right?
There's, I think the time thing is it's really like a shocking difference in the amount of time that you have. For a musical, like something like Spring Awakening or American Idiot, we have about 6 weeks of rehearsal, and everyone is there, if you want them to be, every day. They spend the first week or so learning the music, and then you start staging it. Sometimes you even sit around the table and talk about the scenes. You do table work, and then you put it up on its feet, and the choreographer comes in, and it's a process. And sometimes you have more than one room going at once. You'll have a room
And then you
for
do it
this.
again. That might just be a workshop process.
Right.
So you might do that a year before.
Like we
you
did
do
with
the-
Spring Awakening
Spring
and
Awakening
American Idiot. Yeah. So, but rehearsal proper goes.
Workshop process meaning you're putting it up somewhere and then like you see, okay, does that work? And then you
Exactly.
go through
Yeah.
the whole thing again a second
Then you
time.
go through it, then you're in real production, and sometimes you're out of town first. I mean, there's a whole process.
A lot of
But-
test driving.
Right. But once you're in the New York version of it, you have 6 weeks of rehearsal. Then you go on stage for about 2 weeks of tech rehearsals, and each rehearsal is between 8 to 10 hours, and you have full lights and costumes and
And
then
tech means running through every
that's
single cue,
through all the cues, and you usually start
writing cues and working out every little
and you
music
start
cue
from
and
the
lighting cue.
beginning, and you work through it, and then once you finish that, you run it, and then you do run-throughs and dress rehearsals, and then you have 4 weeks of previews where you can change things, and you look at it and you go, I really think that if that sofa could be like a slightly different color, or can't those lights come up a little, you can really, it's like a fine-tuning kind of thing, and performance-wise too, and writing and all of it.
And at the Met, so the Met, how many weeks do you have? And I understand that everyone isn't together for all of it, right?
Yeah, you
do
have
the-
a little over, it's almost a month for the beginning to end. Yeah. We started rehearsals on December 31st. And not every, and you work with who you have. The main difference is that the chorus, which is the most hardworking chorus I've ever, imagined in my life, like they'll be doing a piano dress rehearsal in the morning on the stage of the Met. They'll go in the afternoon to rehearse a different opera, and that night they're performing a third opera. I mean, they never ever stop. So you get them in little chunks.
Like 1 hour, 2 hour chunks.
Yeah, a couple hours at a time, a few times. We had them 4 times in rehearsal.
And so they're rehearsing their bit, and then they're the supers. Is that what it's called?
We have a handful of supers, and they don't sing, and they don't dance, but they're there to like be a bartender or people
And
like
then
that.
there's
And then we
the
have dancers.
And then there's
We
the dancers, and they rehearse on their own.
and they rehearse on
timeline.
their own timeline too.
Then
and
you have the principals.
And the principals have their thing, and then there are the other, like the smaller roles also. So it's like a lot of imagination. So when we teched the show in May,
And that's weird too.
That is
like,
weird,
Like
yeah.
you tech the show. You guys were explaining to me this before. Tech is usually the last thing that you would do
That's
when the
right.
show is all set.
Right.
But you guys, before the cast had rehearsed, or you would even put up the thing, last May, the sets were built, and you teched the show as if there were a show.
right,
With no cast.
with no
nothing.
cast. We had some people called light walkers, and they're these lovely men and women who stand there, and they just go where you tell them to go. But so we're just imagining like, oh, I think he's going to come from up there. I mean, I don't work that way usually. I don't usually block a show out in my head ahead of time. We talk through it, and we usually have a very good idea about what the dramatic action is, but we like to discover stuff in rehearsal. And Christine is in rehearsal all the time usually. So we're there, and it's a more, it's slightly more organic. That said, the beauty of working this way is that the singers know they don't have to learn these roles. They know them, and in many cases they've done them many, many times in lots of different productions. So they know more about the characters than I ever could just from listening to it and reading it and watching other productions and imagining it in my head. So they come with this spectacular wealth of information. So the rooms that we give them to play in, they inhabit instantly with a kind of completion and fullness and complexity and emotional viability that is something that you would work for weeks and weeks and weeks in the theater to get.
Right, because the one thing that you have is that you have you have a work that's actually proven, which is the one thing you don't have using the other way. You and I were talking before this, and you were saying that it wasn't like doing this wasn't like doing musical theater. You said it was much more like doing TV.
Totally, that was so surprising to me. I thought it would be a natural extension from doing a Broadway musical because of so many of the components are the same. But because of the scheduling, you have to sometimes work out of sequence. The days are very short. The tech rehearsals that we get are sometimes only 3.5 hours long, as opposed to the 8 hours, and we only have that for a week, of like a little over a week.
It's like you're part of a big industrial machine.
Exactly, what they're doing so many, I have to say, I mean, you can talk to this too, what Peter is in charge of and what the Met is as an institution.
This is Peter Gelb.
And as a machine is jaw-droppingly spectacular. What they're able to do and do so well, I've never seen anything like it. It's, right? It's like
the main reason that we do tech the set so far in advance is that unlike a Broadway show, when we move a set into a theater in a Broadway show, we take over that space. And it's ours for however long.
We hope
however
for
long
a very,
the show runs.
very
We hope for a
long
very long
time.
time. But at the Met, you are doing your production while 12 to 18 other productions are happening simultaneously throughout the season. So your set is one part of a very large and intricate puzzle. The first time that I was taken on a tour, I was shown the elevators and the turntables and the side stages. I mean, you can't believe what a gorgeous machine it is. But then I was told, well, actually, you can't use any of that because this production and the ring is happening, and you're connecting to a series of existing projects that you're going to be playing in repertory with. So they put the setup on stage so that they can make sure that for the most part, what you're doing can work within the greater being. And they have, like, you walk into work, I walk into work, and it's 10 in the morning, and there are like 150 guys just pulling things apart and throwing things together, and I usually just start crying because I can't believe how incredible it is. And it's just been, somebody told me that the Met is a national treasure, and I really feel that way. It's been unbelievably incredible to work with these people.
Every one of them.
It's been amazing.
It's a real
Now we
honor.
have a video that somebody shot during the rehearsal process, and this might be a good time.
Yes.
You want to set it up?
Yes, let me set it up. In the original, the Duke's first song comes quite early on, and it's Questa o Quella, and it's a song where he basically sings like one woman or another, it's all the same to me. I'm not going to get too attached to that. Monogamy is not for me. And it seemed to me that if we were going to go with this casino theme, that it might be kind of fun to have him, like, if he is like a performer, how much fun would it be to actually watch him sort of do an impromptu performance for all of the guests at the casino.
Like a Frank Sinatra.
Like a Frank Sinatra might. So and there's a little rehearsal of Piotr singing this with some help.
So this is in a rehearsal room. Yes?
Yep, in the rehearsal room, down on the sea level. It's way down there.
We're on sea level, 3 floors below the Met stage,
level.
where other Met productions are in rehearsal, even on a Saturday, because there is very little rest in the world of grand opera. Today, there are rehearsals taking place for Rossini's Le Condori, Puccini's La Rondine, Verdi's Il Trovatore, and behind these doors, the Met's new production of Verdi's Rigoletto with Željko Lučić in the title role. With this new Rigoletto, director Michael Mayer has moved the action from 16th century Mantua to 1960s Las Vegas. Now, it premieres at the Met on January 28th and will be seen live in your movie theater on February 16th. Right now, they're rehearsing the opening scene, including the tenor's first big aria, Questa o Quella, sung by Piotr Beczala, playing the notorious Duke. Let's check it out.
Questa o quella per me mani sono acqua calca, d'intorno vi vedo, del mio cuore l'impero non cedo, dell'iatuna che ha d'altra beltà. La costor avvenenza è qual dono, di che fatto ne fiora la vita. S'oggi questa mi torno gradita, forse un'altra, domani lo sarà un'altra, forse un'altra, domani lo sarà. La costanza tiranna del cuore detestiamo, quel morbo crudele. Sol chi vuole si servi fedele, non vi amor se non ve libertà. De mariti il geloso furore, degli amanti le smanie, derido anco d'argo, dicendo che desfido, se mi punge una qualche beltà. Se mi punge una qualche beltà.
And that's an image from the stills that you showed. It seems like kind of a perverse move to give an opera singer a mic to hold.
I know. Yeah.
Did you have to train him how to hold the mic and hold the cord?
You know, I made a DVD for all the principals of a lot of footage from Rat Pack performances in Vegas, and so they've been studying their microphone moves. It's
And
only
did you coach him on like, okay, so here's how I want you to move to be like Sinatra, like here's the movement for this?
He kind of gets it, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't have to do much in the way of coaching, and I have to say that, you know, these three principals in particular are all as spectacular as they are as singers. They're just as remarkable as actors, and that's been a real blessing to be able to have conversations about character and intention, and to have them embrace this concept as fully as they have has been extremely gratifying and humbling.
So I stopped by 2 rehearsals just to be able to see it, to be able to come up with questions for today, and at both rehearsals I was interested to see that Peter Gelb, who runs the Metropolitan Opera, was at the rehearsals, and like you say, he's running this huge industrial machine where there's all these shows and all these things have to happen, and it was interesting and surprising to see that he was there. And I was wondering, is he there for just kind of like just to see what's happening in general moral support, or what are the ways in which he's given you ideas and nudged things this way or that? And been a creative collaborator? Like, what are the big things that he's been part of? What are the decisions? What is he looking for when he's at the rehearsal, you know?
Well, I think that, first of all, it's amazing to have him there. Sometimes he's working on his computer and making phone calls, but what's amazing is he doesn't miss a thing. And often he'll come over and he'll notice something that I haven't seen. It could be from lighting, costume, a bit of staging, intention. Sometimes I don't know actually how he does it. I don't know that he's like a real human being. He seems like a superhero to me in some way. Like he's got some special powers.
Well, like you were saying that he was the one who nudged you from like, let's not do it contemporary Las Vegas, let's do it 60s
Right.
Las Vegas. Like, have there been other specific things, even just little things, like in the last day or two where...
Well, you know, there were... Like even today, he was noticing certain lighting things, and he would be very aware of if, I mean, we're talking very subtle stuff. Like if the lights on the elevators if we took them down a bit, then it might bring the value that was on one of the actors up more, or asking me what the logic was in the way that we were lighting the chorus in the second act. It's just very, very smart stuff. Also, when it comes time to make some very tough decisions about a piece of scenery or anything else that needs to change, he really what did he say? He had the great line today, something about like, like, look, we have to do it right now. I mean, he understands that there's no time like the present to make
and often in a longer process, the great thing about working with a collaborative team is that you have another pair of eyes that can help you. And usually we act as that for each other. So the lighting designer will come look at a set piece, I'll look at a costume piece, we'll ask Michael about it. But in this situation, things are happening so quickly, and we're all sort of so panicked trying to make sure we're taking care of everything. Then in a way, I think Peter's been acting as the slightly more calm and objective person that we can go to and say, Peter, what do you think about this? What's your gut response? And so he's been somebody that we've been able to rely on as a collaborative member of our team, I would say.
Absolutely, and he was there in May too for every tech rehearsal. Yeah, it was amazing.
I noticed that between last week and this week, one of the things that had been in the set there had been dancing girls like on these floating platforms, and now that's gone.
Yeah, it's funny. I emailed Peter and I said, I think we should cut those girls on the floating discs.
And your feeling about that was?
And
well,
then she...
in the middle of the night, I was writing the same email to Michael saying, I think maybe we should cut the go-go platform. So across the waves of the internet, we were all having
And
this
why?
moment.
What was wrong with it?
They were distracting. It was a great thing. As I said before, so much happens in that first scene. It's action-packed, and anything that takes you away from being able to follow the story became a liability. But it was really funny. I said, well, I haven't heard back from Peter yet, but I think, what do you think? Should we cut them? And my phone, he says, yes. It's like he heard me somehow. It's got special hearing, too.
Do you feel like you can be candid about this? What's your biggest worry between now and a week from tonight when you open?
Well, I've already been warned that the people will probably boo at the opening night, so I'm going to be drunk, basically.
So that's not a worry so much as a plan.
It's a plan. If I had any anxiety, it would just be about that we manage our time appropriately, because now we have, tomorrow we start with the orchestra, so that's the next big piece that we add.
Oh, you haven't rehearsed with the orchestra up till now.
There was a Sitzprobe with the orchestra last week, but no, they haven't been in the room. It's been
what?
A Sitzprobe, but that's where, in German, it means sitting and probing, so. But it's the time when the maestro, in this case Michele Mariotti, can sit with the orchestra, and he's already worked with them.
I see, and so they get to sing with it, and you can work
so they
out.
get to sing with, and what a thrill that was that day, to hear that magnificent orchestra.
Okay, so your biggest worry / plan is to get drunk because people are going to boo, and your biggest worry between now and next week?
First of all, I'm going to jump into Michael's plan and be drunk with him, definitely. I think my biggest worry is that, we won't have time to properly tech through and rehearse frequently enough things like the elevator door sequences, which are quite complicated moments to insert within the action of the story and the music. I feel that they are really good storytelling points, but it's complicated to tech them in. So my biggest fear,
because it isn't like a normal thing, because music is happening, and they have to actually happen.
And the music will keep happening, and so everybody has to have their cues really at the fingertips. And normally, again, in a Broadway show, we would have rehearsed it over and over. We could spend a whole day just practicing the elevators opening and closing and the lights.
We've done very similar things,
Absolutely.
like those IV bags.
IV bags flying
8
in
hours
for an
of
idiot.
flying.
You think you're going to die, but you just keep doing it and you keep doing it. And then by the end, people do it perfectly and you stop being anxious about it. But in this situation, despite how incredibly competent and dedicated everyone is to making it happen, it's very hard to pull it off so quickly. So I think my biggest fear will just be things happening at the wrong moment or not happening as fluidly with the music as we hope.
Let's get back to the booze for a second. The fact that you're so sure there's going to be booze as somebody directing an opera. I want to read you a quote from the opera fan blog Parterre. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right because I don't know enough about opera.
Oh, no.
Parterre?
Parterre, probably.
.com. Last February when the Met announced your production. They pasted language on the press release. There's this new production. It's going to be set in Vegas, 1960. There's a lovely quote from you, Michael, explaining here's why. And then the guy who runs this fan site, he had a one-sentence comment, kind of a pre-review. The sentence he wrote is, hearing about a Rigoletto set in Las Vegas, he wrote, quote, "I think it is officially time to panic." And the thing I wanted to ask is, do the two of you have a message for the opera purists who will be in your audience?
Look, you know what? This has... This is...
Because I have to say that this... Yeah, go ahead.
This opera has been around for a really long time. And I really believe it's done a lot in a lot of opera companies. So if somebody wants to go and see the hunchback with the stick with the bells on his head, there's probably that production 5 or 6 places right now that they can go see it. And it's always going to be there, you know? I think that it's a testament to the magnificence of what Verdi wrote, that it is sturdy enough to support different interpretations. And everything that we've done story-wise has been to fulfill what he's written. We're not changing the story and the music at all. And so what I would say is, like, you know, just open your minds up a little bit and allow for the possibility that you might learn something new about this opera that you think you know so well. Maybe there's a new way in. And also I think that it might encourage people who don't necessarily go to the opera all the time to go and say, like, oh wow, that looks interesting to me. Maybe I can connect with that. I like the Rat Pack. I like Las Vegas. I like that vibe. That poster looks really cool. It does. It looks amazing. Why wouldn't I want to go see that? And then suddenly you've got these maybe even young people going to the opera and having an experience and recognizing themselves in these characters that. And learning something about human nature and about art and about culture and who knows, maybe it encourages a growing audience for the opera. Wouldn't that be nice?
Christine, yeah. Thank you. Christine, your message for the purists who might be showing up?
Well, I think, I understand that it might be seen as sort of radical and bold, but we've gone into it with the very best intentions, as Michael said, to serve the story. And so in that sense, I sometimes feel like what we've done is actually incredibly naturalistic, straightforward, almost mundane, because it's trying to take the literal events, both emotionally, and as we said, even sometimes taking some of the elements that are harder to wrap your head around and making them actually make more sense. So we've gone into it with the very best intentions, so boo if you must, but we come with open hearts and
appreciation for what it is.
And gratitude for the opportunity.
Michael, I know that you're like a huge opera fan, and I read somewhere you wrote that this opera is one of the masterpieces of opera and one of the great creations of mankind. Do you remember when you first heard Rigoletto?
I don't, actually. But I remember I saw a production of it. I'm sure I saw a production of it at the Met in the 80s. And that was one of the ones where I couldn't, where I had to stand through the whole thing because it was so popular. I said the other day that I think maybe I love Lulu so much is because I always had such good seats for it. I was so comfortable. So I definitely saw, and I don't know if it was the Otto Schenk production or if it was the one prior, but I saw a production, and I'm not, again, it might have been Zeffirelli, I'm not sure, but I saw it in Verona at the Arena outside, and I was very moved by it in a way that I hadn't expected to be. And the story, and this guy it just broke my heart to see him trying so hard to protect his daughter and then it all falling apart in such a terrible way. And so from that point on, I really loved it. And when I first met with Peter and we talked about operas and things, and operas that I might like to do, it was way at the top of my list. So I think that's why, one of the reasons when he called me, he was like, I think that was one of the ones you liked, yeah? And I was like, yes, I love it. He said, well, let's start thinking about it. You have 2 days.
And Christine, when did you first listen to it?
Probably the day after Michael called and said, would you like to do this production? Yeah, I am very new to the opera world, and one of the great gifts of doing this production is that the Met has been incredibly generous about giving us tickets so that we can see other productions, and I've fallen for it. And I've had many experiences over this past year, seeing Aida, seeing Madame Butterfly, and I get it. I really get it.
Okay, so we have one more performance. This is like one of the most famous songs in Western music. Do you
Yeah,
wanna
this is
introduce it?
you'll know what it is. But I will say that when Verdi was working on the opera, he came up with the Duke's big aria in Act 3 and kept it under wraps because he knew that if anyone heard it, it would be out there and it wouldn't be a surprise to them when they heard it at the opening in 1851 at La Fenice in Venice. So here to sing La Donna è mobile is Piotr Beczala.
La donna è mobile, qual piuma al vento, muta d'accento e di pensiero, sempre una amabile, leggiadro viso, in pianto il riso e menzognero. La donna è mobile, qual piuma al vento, muta d'accento pensier di pensier di pensier è sempre misero chi a lei s'affida, chi le confida, mal cauto il cuore, pur mai non sentesi felice appieno, chi su quel seno non liba amore. La donna è mobil, qual piuma al vento, muta d'accento di pensier di pensier
Well, thank you both. Thanks for coming out tonight. Thanks to the performers, Craig Rittenberg, by the way, on the piano. And I think there's a reception or something. I don't know exactly what. Thanks so
Booze
much
part.
for being here. Okay.
Thank you.